Tomorrow is the deadline for voters to register in Alabama's special election for a race that could see a Democrat flip a Senate seat in a deep red state. And tomorrow, Republican Roy Moore making his first public appearance in nearly 2 weeks after 8 women came forward with allegations against him. And Moore has continued to deny the allegations in interviews over the last week.
But in response, his opponent Doug Jones claims that Moore has been avoiding the campaign trail. He says, quote, Roy Moore is hiding from his record, hiding from the media, and hiding from voters, disappearing for 10 days at a time and unwilling to go out and even work for their votes.
Doug Jones, meanwhile, facing an uphill battle to defeat Roy Moore. According to the Washington Post, he has to carry more than 90% of African-American voters, boost their turnout as well. And
one endorsement that could go a long way, Alabama native turned Hall of Fame basketball player Charles Barkley.
Roy Moore is running with Steve Bannon as his right-hand man, who's a white separatist. I'm not even going to get into the women's stuff, but a guy, how can you be a white separatist and represent all the constituents in your state? I mean, everybody's going crazy over this sexual allegations. Roy Moore would have, to me, when he brought in Steve Bannon, should have been disqualified. I don't understand. I mean, to me, that's how can you have a guy who's running with a white separatist running for a political office? We got a lot of black people in the state who are amazing people, but to run a campaign with a guy as your chief advocate who is a white nationalist, a white separatist, that should have disqualified Roy Moore way before this women's stuff came up.
And so now there is a new issue that's been introduced in the campaign, and that's the issue of race. Here to talk about all of this, Julian Zelizer, CNN political analyst and historian and professor at Princeton University, and Errol Lewis, CNN political commentator and political anchor at Spectrum News. Good morning again, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Errol, we were talking about this issue yesterday, and that it is crucial, of course, for Doug Jones to get a significant turnout from African-American voters in Alabama. And yet there didn't seem to be a whole lot in the race so far to generate enthusiasm. Does this change things?
I don't know that it necessarily does. I mean, there are a lot of Auburn fans down there, of course, so they'll listen to anything somebody like Charles Barkley has to say. But the reporting on the black turnout, as far as the ability to predict it, seems to suggest that because Doug Jones is a moderate Democrat, he's not a fire breather. He's not an Obama Democrat. He's not out there really whipping and stirring up the crowds and asking them to make history and talking about hope and change. He's really just presenting himself as a good down-the-line Democrat. He's got some civil rights credentials that go a long way with a certain category of voters. But for the younger people who don't necessarily remember the civil rights movement of the 1960s, he's not that big of a figure. So this is going to be, in some ways, kind of a technical problem for the Democrats on the ground who want to sort of organize this and get this done. Charles Barkley, what you just said, what you just showed, is an effective piece of video if you can get it out to everybody. The question is, can you get it out to everybody, and can you make sure they all turn out on December 12th?
And Julian, it appears that Charles Barkley's kind of doing what the president did. In other words, he's saying, don't vote for that other guy. He wasn't so much touting the great things that Doug Jones has done. It was more like, you can't have a man who has got ties apparently to white supremacists holding a Senate seat.
Well, I mean, I think in some ways Barkley's actually onto something, meaning the story of the allegations of sexual molestation and assault have overtaken the other part of Roy Moore, which he's a very far-right extreme conservative that even many Republicans thought was outside the spectrum of what the party needed. And so I think Barkley's actually sending a signal that a Democrat might use, that Doug Jones might use to talk about what's at stake at the race. But in the end, I do think it will be hard to sell the Democrat so much as it will be more effective to really explain what's at risk with this Republican in office.